In 1997, David Bowie did something no rock star had ever done before. He walked into a room of Wall Street executives and walked out with $55 million in his pocket, without writing a single new song. No tour, no box set, no greatest hits compilation. Instead, he sold bonds backed by the future royalties of his existing music catalog. The money he would earn from his music over the next decade, bundled up, securitized, and sold as an asset-backed security. The move rattled the music industry. It rescued him from financial ruin, and it forever changed how artists value their work. This is the story of how David Bowie, already a master of reinvention, transformed himself one final time from an artist trapped by his past into a financial revolutionary who beat the system at its own game. The glitter and glamour of David Bowie's stage personas hid a painful truth. The man who gave us Ziggy Stardust was quietly going broke. The source of Bowie's troubles? A disastrous contract with his former manager, Tony DeFries. In the early 1970s, as Bowie's star was rising, he signed away around 50% of the royalties from his most iconic works. Every time Space Oddity played on the radio, or someone bought Ziggy Stardust, half the money flowed straight into DeFries' pockets. Reports suggest Bowie was reportedly deeply distressed when he realized what he'd signed away, though he never publicly confirmed the extent of his distress. This crisis coincided with his heaviest cocaine use in the mid-1970s. The combination nearly destroyed him. By 1975, after releasing the soul-influenced Young Americans album, his relationship with DeFries had become unsustainable. Their split was bitter and acrimonious, but the damage was done. The music that had made Bowie famous wasn't fully his anymore. One person emerged as his anchor during this chaos: Corinne Coco Schwab, his personal assistant and confidant hired in 1973. Coco did far more than manage his schedule. She helped him battle addiction, navigate financial turmoil, and eventually became one of his most trusted confidants. But even with her support, Bowie's financial situation remained dire. His creative output never stopped, from his experimental Berlin trilogy to his commercial triumph, Let's Dance. But the financial constraints from those early contracts followed him for decades. The bitter irony? Bowie's most revolutionary music was making someone else rich. And as the 1990s began, he was determined to change that. Fast forward to 1997. CD sales were booming. The digital revolution was just a distant threat. Bowie, now 50, had found personal stability with his marriage to supermodel Iman. But those early contracts still haunted him. And Bowie, always ahead of his time, sensed the music industry was about to change forever. That's when investment banker David Pullman approached him with an idea so radical it had never been attempted in music history. What if Bowie could convert the future royalties from his catalog into immediate cash by issuing bonds? The concept was revolutionary. Investors would buy bonds backed not by real estate or government guarantees, but by the predicted future earnings of songs like Heroes, Changes, and Life on Mars. Pullman later recalled Bowie's instant understanding. "Once I explained it to him, David said, 'Why haven't we started yet?' He never questioned it for a minute." David got the concept instantly, as recalled by Pullman. What made this possible was Bowie's unusual foresight years earlier. He had negotiated to own or regain control of his master recordings for the relevant catalog. This crucial ownership gave him the collateral needed for Pullman's innovative plan. On February 12, 1997, the announcement surprised the music world. David Bowie had issued $55 million in bonds backed by royalties from 25 pre-1990 albums. Prudential Financial purchased the entire offering, giving Bowie immediate cash in exchange for a 7.9% annual interest rate over 10 years. The press immediately dubbed them Bowie Bonds, the first ever case of a musician securitizing their intellectual property. Why would Bowie essentially bet against his own future earnings? Because he had a plan for that money, one that would change everything. The $55 million wasn't for mansions or private jets. Bowie had one primary mission: buy back his early catalog from Tony DeFries. With this new war chest, Bowie finally had leverage. Though the exact amount is undisclosed, estimates suggest Bowie reportedly paid around $27 million to regain control from DeFries. The negotiations weren't easy. As Pullman noted, Tony is very savvy. "I didn't realize he's an attorney, not just a manager. But money talks." For the first time since the early 1970s, Bowie was regaining control over the music that defined his career. The remaining funds gave him freedom to invest in his future. He launched BowieNet in 1998, his own internet service provider with exclusive content and early social networking features. BowieNet ran from 1998 to 2006, pioneering artist-driven online platforms despite modest success. It demonstrated his forward-thinking approach to technology when most artists hadn't even considered the internet's impact on music. Most importantly, the bonds bolstered his financial security, enabling greater creative freedom. With financial security and his catalog largely under his control, he could now make artistic choices based on creative desire rather than financial necessity. Albums like Heathen, 2002, and Reality, 2003, showcased an artist still pushing boundaries, now freed from the pressure to create commercial hits to stay afloat. The $55 million had accomplished what seemed impossible. David Bowie, once near bankruptcy, once forced to watch half his earnings flow to a former manager, had transformed his financial situation and consolidated control over his artistic legacy in one bold stroke. What Bowie did in that boardroom didn't just rescue his own finances, it ignited a gold rush. Suddenly, every manager in the music industry was frantically calling their financial advisors, asking one question: can my client do what Bowie just did? Overnight, Bowie changed how suits on Wall Street looked at rock and roll. Songs weren't just something you played on the radio anymore. They were assets you could slice up, package, and trade like financial products. When Moody's slapped an A3 investment-grade rating on the bonds, the same level as many Fortune 500 companies, Wall Street officially welcomed rock and roll to the trading floor. Record executives who had always lowballed artists suddenly scrambled to recalculate. If Bowie's songs were worth $55 million, what were the Beatles or Elvis catalogs actually worth? Other artists quickly followed Bowie's lead. James Brown, Iron Maiden, and Motown's legendary songwriting team, Holland Dozier Holland, all pursued similar deals. The Pullman Group found itself at the center of a new financial frontier in music. Bowie's bonds stood apart in one crucial aspect. They included the master recordings, not just publishing rights. Most subsequent celebrity bonds covered only publishing, making Bowie's deal more comprehensive and valuable than the copycats that followed. As innovative as Bowie bonds were, their moment would be brief. By the early 2000s, the music industry faced unprecedented disruption. File-sharing services like Napster fundamentally challenged the revenue model that had made the bonds attractive. Bowie had anticipated this shift. In a 2002 New York Times interview, he predicted, "Music itself is going to become like running water or electricity. The absolute transformation of everything that we ever thought about music will take place within 10 years, and nothing is going to be able to stop it." This prophecy proved remarkably accurate. As digital piracy increased and CD sales declined, the royalty streams backing the Bowie bonds weakened. By 2004, Moody's downgraded the bonds to Ba3 rating, nearly junk status. Yet despite these challenges, the bonds fulfilled their obligations. All payments to Prudential were made on time, and by 2007, exactly 10 years after issuance, the bonds were fully paid off. Bowie had timed his innovation perfectly, capturing maximum value from his catalog just before the traditional music business model began to crumble. With his finances secured and his rights reclaimed, Bowie entered the 2000s stronger than he'd been in decades. This security enabled him to explore artistically while diversifying his career. He took on memorable acting roles in films like Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, 2006. He collaborated with younger artists who had grown up influenced by his work, from Arcade Fire to TV on the radio. After suffering a heart attack in 2004, Bowie largely withdrew from public performance, focusing on family life with Iman and their daughter Alexandria. His creative output continued sporadically, culminating in The Next Day in 2013 after a decade of silence, proving he could still command critical attention and commercial success. His final masterstroke came with Black Star, released just 2 days before his death from liver cancer on January 10, 2016. With Black Star, Bowie pulled off the impossible. He turned even his own death into art, leaving the world a parting gift just days before he left it. In his final bow, he was still calling the shots, still surprising us. When Bowie passed away, he left behind an estate reportedly valued at approximately $200 million, with his music catalog estimated at $100 million. A remarkable turnaround from the financial precariousness of his early career. 6 years after his death came the final mic drop. His estate sold his publishing rights for $250 million, nearly 5 times what those Wall Street investors paid in 1997. The man who sold the world had, in the end, sold his catalog for a king's ransom. Bowie's approach has influenced a generation of artists. Taylor Swift's decision to re-record her early albums to regain control of her master recordings follows the path Bowie helped forge, asserting ownership over one's creative output as both an artistic and financial imperative. David Pullman, who structured the original Bond deal, acknowledged Bowie's pivotal role. "Bowie made me famous. If I am standing on someone's shoulders, it's David Bowie's." Despite their success, Bowie Bonds became the subject of both criticism and mythology as years passed. The most immediate challenge came from the music industry's digital transformation. As streaming gradually replaced ownership, the value proposition of royalty-backed bonds grew uncertain. Moody's 2004 downgrade of Bowie Bonds to nearly junk status reflected these concerns. Some critics pointed to this downgrade as evidence the bonds had failed. But here's what the critics missed. Despite Napster, iTunes, and the complete collapse of CD sales, every single payment went out on time. Prudential got every penny they were owed, plus interest. Bowie delivered, just like always. Perhaps the strangest controversy emerged years later, when financial commentators tried linking Bowie Bonds to the 2008 financial crisis. The argument suggested that by pioneering asset-backed securities in entertainment, Bowie had somehow contributed to the risky securitization practices behind the mortgage meltdown. That's like blaming the inventor of the butter knife for a stabbing spree. As The Guardian pointed out, mortgage-backed securities had been around since the 1970s. Comparing Bowie's $55 million deal to the trillion-dollar subprime mortgage disaster is like comparing a campfire to a forest fire. What's particularly revealing is why Bowie pursued the bond deal when he did. Reports and his later comments suggest Bowie worried about piracy's impact by the late 1990s, suspecting royalty streams might shrink as music consumption changed. This foresight, selling high before the market changed, shows his business acumen matching his artistic vision. In retrospect, Bowie Bonds represent not a controversy, but a triumph of timing. A perfect moment when an artist's understanding of both his cultural value and impending technological disruption allowed him to leverage his past to secure his future. David Bowie's career was defined by transformation, from David Jones to Ziggy Stardust, from the thin white duke to elder statesman of art rock. But his most consequential transformation happened far from the spotlight. His transformation from a cash-strapped rock star watching others get rich off his music to a financial innovator who taught the entire industry that artists could play and win at Wall Street's own game. The Bowie Bonds weren't just clever, they were pure Bowie. The same man who killed off Ziggy Stardust at his peak now saw the CD boom would crash before anyone else did. While other rock stars were still cashing royalty checks without a second thought, Bowie was already 3 steps ahead, just like always. This financial innovation perfectly embodies what made Bowie exceptional: the ability to see around corners, to anticipate changes before they happened, to transform challenges into opportunities. From the desperate financial straits of the 1970s to the groundbreaking Bond deal of 1997 to the $250 million catalog sale. Following his death, Bowie's financial journey mirrors his artistic one, a story of reinvention, resilience, and triumph. The man who fell to earth eventually rose to untouchable heights, not just as an artist, but as a pioneer who understood that true artistic freedom often requires financial independence. In a world where artists still struggle for ownership of their work, Bowie's example shines as brightly as his music, a blueprint for how creators can take control of their destinies, both artistic and financial. Was Bowie a financial genius ahead of his time, or just incredibly lucky with his timing? Which other artists could benefit from taking back control of their catalogs the way Bowie did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. After all, the business of rock and roll should be just as interesting as the music itself. If you enjoyed this deep dive into David Bowie's financial innovation, hit subscribe for more stories about the unexpected side of music history. Next week, we explore how Aerosmith's comeback strategy changed the rock industry forever.